Almost at 12:30. Welcome back to Central Valley Talk. It is Thursday, the 11th of March. I'm Austin Reed, coming to you live from our Tower District studios in Fresno's historic Tower District. It is cloudy out again today. Hopefully we'll see some sunshine by the weekend. Hit me up on Facebook, Austin Reed on Air, also on Instagram and Twitter. And thanks for watching us live right now on YouTube TV, Facebook, Instagram, and at CentralValleyTalk.com. Hey, if you're looking for a cool podcast to check out, a local one, I have just the idea for you. My next guest is Anthony, a.k.a. OMG. With the Sitdown podcast.
Yes,
Good to meet you.
It's nice to meet you, man. It's happy to be on. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So tell us what the Sitdown is all about.
Yeah, so the sit down, I like to look at it as a mini version of the Joe Rogan, minus the celebrity power. So basically, like, I don't sit down and interview people. I know I get that a lot. They're like, oh, like, can you interview me? Or I like to interview, things like that. But I don't really look at them that way because I don't really have a certain angle I'm looking to when I talk to people. I just kind of wanted to show the power of conversation when I sit down with people, because I think it's very powerful to show like how much you can really get out of like a full-blown conversation, which I think doesn't happen as much anymore, because everything's through like phone and DMs and things like that, and people are always like retweeting and things like that. So I think actually saying like your piece and your opinion to one another, you can get a lot more out of that. So it's just kind of like a demonstration of the age-old art of conversation.
So then now you were telling me these podcasts that you're doing, they're on all the major podcasting platforms.
Yeah, it's everything. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartMedia, I think Castbox is one. Like pretty much anywhere you get a podcast, you can find me. Even YouTube, and the sit down has to be one word.
Okay.
So sit down one word, and that's how you'll find me like the fastest.
So are you doing, we're looking at some video from your Facebook page. You're doing video as well?
Correct. Yeah. Okay. So I just started that. Like, it's been doing it for about, I think I got 15 full episodes up now. I didn't start it with video initially because I honestly was a little uncomfortable, starting doing audio and then jumping straight into video. So it took me a minute to get on there, but it's on there, and I think people like that a lot better than they just like hearing the voices. So
yeah, especially if they're home.
Yeah.
And they're bored.
Mm-hmm. It gives you more of a personal touch. That's what I've heard. Like, people like to see the reactions of people's faces and like my face and things like that, because it's kind of cool about the sit down is when I sit with people, I'm barely meeting them for the first time, like right before the show. And so it's kind of like, and it's people that aren't usually like used to being on camera in the first place. So it's kind of like a human feeling of.
So it's a real conversation.
It's a real conversation. Like, it's not, I don't tell them anything about it before. Like, if they want to look at the show that I do, that's how they can get some kind of idea. But other than that, I don't tell them what we're going to talk about, nothing like that. And the conversation kind of happens real organically.
Talk a little bit about your background in podcasting. Is this something you always wanted to do, or did you just kind of think of it out of nowhere, a year and a half, 2 years ago?
Yeah, so it's kind of a bit of both. So I found it through college. I went to Greenville University, which is a small school in southern Illinois. So we were a lot closer to St. Louis than we are Chicago. Everyone always like, oh, you went to school in Chicago. I'm like, no, we're like 3 hours away. We're like on the bottom part. So we were like an hour from St. Louis.
Okay.
So I studied psychology and media communications.
Nice.
And so through my media communications degree, my professor would have us do podcasting like projects. So it started with real simple, like interview somebody and record it, things like that, like real simple, real bare bones stuff. And I noticed as I started doing that and messing with like audio, I was just like, I really enjoyed like kind of creating something, like just like that wasn't even existence in the world, and I've always had a fascination to make like beats and stuff, but I never was able to do it. I can't even hold a beat, so I just something I never had a skill to do, but making a podcast, it felt it gave me like that same feeling that I feel like if I were to make a beat. And so I kind of just had that like love, and I like put it in my back pocket. And then when I graduated, I really couldn't get a job. I couldn't get any kind of like media job. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's a tough industry.
It's a tough industry to break into. And so I was just like, you know what? Like, I'm gonna hire myself. And so I basically started the Sit Down podcast because I wanted to contribute, and I still wanted to do what I learned in college. And so that's kind of what I'm exercising through my podcast.
So do you have sponsors?
Currently, no.
Okay.
I'm not looking to monetize it quite yet.
Okay.
Because I'm still learning on how to like consistently put out a good show and like find the identity of the show and things like that. I break my show up into seasons, so I have like season 1, season 2, and then I think in season 3 is when I'm gonna kind of make a push for sponsorships and things like that.
But the main thing is just you doing it out of love and
Yeah.
having the passion to have a real deep conversation with your listeners as well as with your guests.
Correct. That's what I really like about it. I mean, that's really why I love doing it, because it keeps me connected with not only my old friends, because at the beginning I had a lot of old friends on.
Which is cool, yeah.
Yeah, so
I'd love to have my friends on this show.
Exactly. So
we'd have a real conversation, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, so it's really cool to have that connection, and like if I haven't had a friend on for a while, I'm saying come on the podcast, and so it's a great way to like meet up and hang out again, because it's not like we just do the podcast and he leaves. Like we do the podcast and we hang out for a bit. Yeah. We hang out before, and it's just a real like good like way to stay connected with my old friends, but also to meet new people, like people that I never thought I would ever meet ever. You know what I mean? Also, it's crazy now that the shows have grown, like really, really talented people are wanting to come on, and I'm just like so flattered. I'm like, you want to come on and talk to me? Like that's amazing to me. And so I think just the genuine conversation has kind of stood out, and it's really caught people's attention.
Tell me, so since you've been doing this for a year, right?
A little over a year.
Over a year. What are your favorite episodes? Just at least one.
Well, I think I have two like that are my most favorite. I think for the first one, like the very first one was like one of my favorites, because I kind of the podcast, like it was weird because I was like, I want to do the podcast, and then the next day I kind of like wrote out something and I called one of my friends, was like, hey, I'm gonna do a podcast, I want you to be my first guest. And then the next day I finished like writing, I'm like, okay, I think this is what the podcast is gonna be. And then so I was like, I rushed down to Kalinga where I had my first guest. I don't know if you're familiar where Kalinga's at.
Yep.
Yeah, so I went down there, and on my way down there, I was like, I think I should get a better mic than the one I have, because I had some like cheap like $10 mic that my like one of my friends lended to me, and she was just like, I don't even know if it works. But I was so excited to get it done that I didn't really care. I was like, we'll figure it out. But then on my way there, I was like, I remembered I had Best Buy gift cards back from when I graduated, people gave to me.
Perfect.
So I stopped at Best Buy and I got a mic, and then I recorded the show that night. So I thought that was like a really exciting, like, just like it happened so fast, and then there was the first episode. So, and it went perfect, you know? And then the next favorite one was probably episode 7. Episode 7 was a big monument for me because I always did, like, I did my research on podcasting, and it's always like after episode 7, it tends to die, whether it's just lack of work ethic or the show wasn't like structurally like deep enough to go longer than 7. And so my 7th episode was big because it was the first time I sat down with like a stranger, like someone I had no idea of who that person was. Like, she reached out to me and was like, hey, I would love to be on the podcast. And I was like, awesome, let's do it. And I planned it for episode 7 specifically because I wanted that breakout, like for me, like to kind of get that stigma off. Like, I made it to episode 7.
Right.
And so at that time I was working at GameStop, and I worked till like 8, and I went, and she lived in Paris. So it's like out in Southern California. So I drove her, then I pulled up at her house at like 11 o'clock, like 11 p.m. And so I pulled up at some stranger's house at 11 p.m. And so she was living with her family, and so she had her family like in the back as we pulled in, and like we did it on like 2 TV trays right in the middle of her living room. Also something that was really special is she actually claims non-binary, so she doesn't really claim a gender.
Okay.
Like, so she came out and told her story about how like it, like all that kind of transpired through childhood and the trauma, and it was just a really, really, really deep story. Like, it was like very touching, and like at that point, that was the first time I had like anything like that, right? So it was just like, it was like a deep and like traumatic story, but then also really beautiful because it was the first time she's ever came out and like spoke on this in a public forum, because this is something like, if you like know her, because you were like around that, but it was the first time she came out like on a platform and like really said everything that came out. And so that was just a really powerful episode.
And I'm sure it was very healing for her.
Yeah. So, I mean, because I remember she called me and was just so like appreciative of like having her on and things like that. And I guess her and her family like really like came close because like her family knew all this stuff and of course was part of it, but like hearing it like from her mouth was just like really like big, and it brought them a lot closer. So it was just a really like beautiful like experience all the way around.
All right, so tell me, we've got about a minute left. Any advice for people that want to get into the podcasting world?
Yeah, I think don't overthink it and stay consistent. 'Cause I think like a lot of people when they get into podcasting, they want a lot to happen really fast, but podcasting is a long game. So I think
Be patient.
Be patient, be consistent, and don't overthink it. And then of course, most importantly, have fun. That's really the ingredients to having a long-lasting show that people will enjoy.
So the Sit Down podcast, check it out online. It's everywhere.
Yeah, it's
mostly everywhere.
Everywhere. The Sit Down, one word, and you'll find me.
Very good. And then you've got the video portion on YouTube.
On YouTube, yes.
Awesome. Yes. Love it. Love it. Well, hey, if you ever want me to come on, I'd be honored.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
So, yeah.
That'd be amazing.
Was it weird being interviewed?
It was definitely. I'm used to one leading the conversation, but
Yeah.
it's kind of a nice change of pace.
Yeah, it is. It is. I bet. All right, Anthony. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for watching Central Valley Talk. I'm Austin Reed. We're back with more live local guests throughout the day right here at CentralValleyTalk.com. Hang tight.